Hello everybody, Radio Mike here, welcome back to my channel, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the August edition of Mike's Monthly Movies, my monthly movie vlog where I talk about all the movies I watched in a whole month. This month I watched more movies than any month this year, probably because Melbourne, where I live, was in lockdown and we had nothing to do, so we just watched movies pretty much every night. I think I watched like 20 movies, so this might be the longest episode so far. But in the meantime, before we start, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel and check out some of my other videos. There are a bunch of series on this channel now, including my podcast, 20th Century Boy, Mike Talks, Mike Plays Games with Friends, Mike Check, my comedy series. Go and check them all out if you haven't already. And of course, Mike's Monthly Movies. Go and check out the January, February, March, April, May, June, July. There's 7 other episodes. I'm talking movies every bloody month in this series. So let's get started with this one. With the first movie that I watched in September, August 2021, which was... Okay, Moon is like a science fiction film about a guy who works on a spaceship on the moon. I'd heard some really good things about this, so I wanted to check it out, but I was pretty underwhelmed by it. I get that it was a really low budget film, and there's like this twist concept in the middle that becomes like the driving force of the rest of the film, but overall I thought this was like pretty average, like it was fine but a bit boring, and I don't know, overall, yeah, pretty disappointing. I don't really have too much more to say on this one because I was expecting it to be awesome based on what I'd heard about it, and it wasn't actually that good in the end, but I'd be interested to know if people have seen this and what they thought. Next. I don't know why I have never seen the movie Tarzan before, the Disney Tarzan before. The only experience I have with the Disney movie Tarzan is in the video game Kingdom Hearts, where you play as a boy who goes to all the Disney worlds and explores all the Disney worlds, and you meet Tarzan in the Tarzan world.
Not Clayton.
And in that sense, it was actually pretty fun to see the movie that was based on, which I guess is the opposite way to what you were supposed to do. But I just never saw this movie growing up, and I really, really liked it. I thought the animation was great. The story was awesome. As well as the music and soundtrack by Phil Collins, who also did the Brother Bear soundtrack years after this, but I love that movie as well. This was really cool. The vibe was great. I really want to catch up on all like the classic Disney movies that I haven't seen before because they are continuing to really impress me if you've been watching this series all year. Slumdog Millionaire is a great movie with Dev Patel that I saw once when I was a kid, but I didn't really understand it because I was really young, so I really wanted to rewatch it, and I love this movie so much. It is such a great story. I think it's based on a book, and I just think Dev Patel is one of the best actors ever. I think he's so cool, and you know, we all saw him in Generation 1 of Skins as Anwar, but he's just surely the most successful actor post that generation of Skins, except for maybe Nicholas Hoult, who was in like X-Men, but not as a huge role. He was like Beast. Anyway, that's besides the point. Slumdog Millionaire is this amazing film, and I highly recommend you watch it. It is really grounded, it is really well made, and it can be quite confronting at points as well, but ultimately I guess has a kind of happy ending. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking this movie out. The Possession of Michael King is this like not really well-known horror movie, found footage style that I regret watching because it was pretty bad. Like I said, it's a found footage movie about this guy who wants to prove that spirits and demons and stuff don't exist, so he purposely does like a demon summoning ritual and all this stuff, and obviously, because it's a horror, does end up getting possessed by a demon. It was really average, it was really slow, typical kind of jump scares. Found footage is always a really interesting genre. I think it can be done really well, but it's definitely overdone, and it's definitely a way for like people who are making low budget films to just like make a horror movie. Like, found footage doesn't really work in many other genres. I think the best found footage movie though is Chronicle, which is the superhero found footage movie. I thought that was amazing, and that's one of my favorite movies, but I'm not talking about that. Anyway, this movie sucks. Next. I won't talk too much about the Suicide Squad because I did do a full video on it, but basically I thought this was pretty good. Definitely an upgrade from the original Suicide Squad. Definitely an upgrade from the original Suicide Squad movie. Margot Robbie, again, great as Harley Quinn, but I didn't think it was as good as everyone thought it was. Like, I think it's a pretty average movie. It's pretty slow. It takes about an hour to get into it. It's a bit disjointed at points as well, but overall, this is a fun movie. Go check out the full video if you want to hear my thoughts. Again, I talked a little bit about Black Widow and Scarlett Johansson suing Disney over the release of this movie in a video, but in terms of the movie itself, I thought this one was pretty average as well, and kind of out of place in the MCU generally. The post-credit scene, spoiler alert, does set up an upcoming series on Disney+, but generally, I just thought this was, a little bit out of place, a little bit irrelevant based on where we are currently at. It definitely was supposed to come out much earlier, and I didn't think this was particularly great. I gave it 3 stars. Florence Pugh is a particular highlight. I really enjoy her as an actress, but overall, I think this was kind of an unnecessary release at this time. I understand it was supposed to come out earlier, but yeah, I don't know how this really fits in or advanced the MCU in any way. And I never really thought that Black Widow was a particularly interesting character, just like Hawkeye, but those are just my thoughts. Next. Jungle Cruise was a really good surprise from Disney Plus that I really enjoyed. For whatever reason, and there's this meme going around, I think that The Rock just seems to be in all jungle-themed movies. For example, the 2 new Jumanji movies, and like Journey to the Center of the Earth, I think as well. There's a meme, look it up or I'll try and find it. I don't know. But I actually quite enjoyed this. Like, I thought this was really good and really refreshing for what it was. Just a really fun kind of family adventure film, which I haven't watched many of recently. I suppose this is probably the only one I've watched. As far as like story goes, it was, pretty standard for what you might expect from a jungle adventure movie. And I really like how Disney tries to squeeze as much money out of all of their properties as possible. Like, this is literally a movie based on a ride, the same way that Pirates of the Caribbean was a movie based on a ride that ended up getting 4 sequels, and, Disney really likes money. They really like squeezing pennies out of literally everything. They also did a Tomorrowland movie a few years ago that wasn't particularly successful, but that was obviously based on Tomorrowland at Disney World. It's interesting, and I thought this was one of the successful experiments, I suppose. So yeah, I enjoyed this, and I think you should watch it. Pig is an independent film starring Nicolas Cage about a guy who... it's quite a surreal story in some ways. He basically loves his pig, who helps him find these rare truffles that he sells to a chef, and I don't know, watch this movie, it's really good. Basically, it's an older and more mature Nicolas Cage in a pretty impressive performance that I enjoyed very thoroughly. It kind of subverts your expectation. Like, I guess you kind of think it's going to be this crazy action film with lots of fight scenes and killing, but every time you think that's going to happen, it kind of subverts it a lot. This is a really mature film, it's really touching, and I really enjoyed it. Becky is another indie kind of film that is like an action thriller kind of vibe. It is essentially about this girl and her family who go to like a holiday house in the country and are harassed and stalked by these prison escapees who are trying to find something that Becky has. And Becky, who's like this 14-year-old girl, turns out to be this, murdering superstar who gets her revenge on all these prison escapees who hurt her family. Good action scenes, pretty silly at points, but I think this is a fun watch. I enjoyed it a fair bit. I thought all of the acting was pretty good. Joel McHale from Community is in it as well. I thought this was a pretty fun movie that I think, looking back on it, I think more fondly on it than I did at the time, and I'd recommend you check this one out. I thought it was really fun. It's cool seeing like this 14-year-old girl go on a murderous and bloody rampage. I found that really fun. So yeah, recommend you check it out. The Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie is like this movie that I found on Netflix that I wanted to watch because I saw Space Jam 2 last month and talked about that, and I just wanted to see more like classic Looney Tunes shorts. And basically this movie is a collection of classic Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner shorts. There's not much to say about it. It's basically just a collection of classic cartoons, and it was a bit of fun. Like, a lot of them are really creative and really great and entertaining, but generally speaking, like, I wouldn't watch this again. I kind of did just want to watch some classic Looney Tunes, so I put this on, but I'm sure I could find like a YouTube compilation if I wanted to do that in future, but yeah, this was pretty average overall. Hands down the best movie I've seen all year, and one of the only movies I think this year that I gave 5 stars that I've watched for the first time was Lion. If you do not know the story of Lion, just go into it blind. It is a phenomenal and true story. I talked extensively about this movie in my podcast, 20th Century Boy. I'll put a link to the episode in the description below, so please go and check that out. Basically, in short, it's about a boy who gets lost in India as a child and tries to find his way home. And I think if you haven't seen this, like I said, go in blind. Incredible movie. Totally blew me away. This true human story that I would argue is one of the greatest human stories ever in the history of humans. And there have been a lot of human stories over the years, believe me. Seriously, watch this movie, it's really good. Absolutely a highlight of my year. I watched Thor: The Dark World because I had 2 MCU movies that I had never seen. This one and The Winter Soldier. Still haven't seen The Winter Soldier. I'm sure I will eventually see it, but I've just always found Captain America to be a very, very boring superhero. Same with Thor. Dark World is the bridge between Thor 1 and Thor Ragnarok, and it's really average. Again, didn't particularly think there was anything special about it, but didn't think it was terrible by any means. That being said, you can definitely see how refreshing Thor Ragnarok was to this character when watching Dark World. Like, Ragnarok is just such an incredible film in the MCU, let alone just as of the superhero genre in general, but also just a comedy kind of action film, whereas Dark World is still very much in this thing of Thor being a pretty serious character and pretty bland character. I think Ragnarok really gave the character a chance to shine. Dark World was pretty average, but I'm glad I watched it because now I've nearly seen every MCU movie and I think that's pretty cool. Till Death is another horror movie that I watched, which has a really interesting concept, but is kind of let down by some pretty woeful acting from Megan Fox, who I understand is not known necessarily for her acting. I know she was in Transformers, she was also in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle reboots that I've talked about on this pod a little bit, but yeah, she's not great. She is the lead character in this movie, and the concept is great. Basically, she's having an affair and her husband takes her away for like a couple's getaway, handcuffs himself to her, and shoots himself in the head. Now she has to lug around her husband's dead corpse and try to escape. It kind of has a little bit of a vibe of Gerald's Game, which I also watched this year and talked about on this series a few months ago. And it is pretty fun to watch the kind of things and the barbarity of the whole situation, but overall, like, pretty average, but would give it a watch if you're into horror. Absolute classic, Lilo and Stitch. Had not seen this movie since I was very young, and I gotta say, this is a fantastic movie. It's so emotional, the animation is great, the character designs are awesome. Pleakley has got to be one of the most progressive characters in the history of cinema. He's so blatantly gay, he cross-dresses, I love it. I love Pleakley. He's awesome, just straight out awesome.
Agent Pleakley at your service.
I love the Hawaiian setting, I love the themes of Ohana, I love when Stitch says stuff like cousin and Ohana means family. I can't do a very good Stitch impression, rate my Stitch impression in the comments. But I think this has a really nice through line of family and hardship and struggles between Lilo and her sister, and Stitch coming into the picture and learning to love Lilo, and I just thought this was such a sweet movie. I really kind of want to watch the sequels to this. There's actually 3 other Lilo and Stitch movies, one of which is Stitch, the pilot to the TV series, and the finale to that is also a movie which is called Leroy and Stitch, which I have seen both, but not for a very long time, and I would like to check them out. There's also one just called Lilo and Stitch 2, which I'd also be interested in watching. But yeah, shout out to my man Pleakley, he's awesome. I Care a Lot is an excellent action movie about a woman who is committing fraud against a bunch of retirees and stealing their money. and who ends up kind of fucking with the wrong person. There are some really great performances in this. The story is great. It's such a funny kind of satire of the American dream, which is ripping people off and stealing their money kind of vibes. I enjoyed this very much. There's a lot of laughs. It's an action-packed movie that has lots of twists and turns, and the ending is just really great as well. I really recommend this to pretty much everyone. It is a ton of fun. The King of Kong is a documentary that I have been wanting to watch for a very long time. This is great. This is such a charming movie. If you don't know, it is about the kind of battle between two world record holders in the arcade game Donkey Kong. I wondered how much Nintendo had to do with this. I assume not much at all, because I know they tend to not necessarily like their games being about competitiveness. They like to display their games as being about fun, but this movie is so funny. It's super low budget, and there is just, it almost feels like satire at times, with one of the guys whose name I can't remember, who's kind of like the dickhead of the two guys, and then the other guy who is very much a wholesome guy who just likes playing Donkey Kong, who's trying to beat the record. It's a lot of fun. If you've seen it, there's this fantastic scene where this really geeky guy is walking around the arcade telling everyone, hey, there's a kill screen coming up on Donkey Kong. If you've seen it, you know. If you know, you know. It is so funny. Such a charming movie. Really quick documentary as well on like a really interesting niche topic. You don't have to be into games to like enjoy this movie, but yeah, give it a watch. It's a lot of fun. Mr. Deeds is another movie that I watched when I was very young and didn't really understand, and I am going to put an unpopular opinion out there and say that I love Adam Sandler. I think Adam Sandler is really cool. I think Big Daddy is a masterpiece. Look, there's not much going on in this movie. It's a very, very average movie. Below average, if anything. It's definitely not Adam Sandler's best. It's not particularly funny. I mean, not much more to say. Basically, it's a story about Adam Sandler getting really rich and trying to get a girl. The other thing is lots of really dated humor that borders on like sexual harassment and stuff. And it is interesting that these movies from like the 2000s to even like 2014 always contain these really, really shocking comedic parts that would not fly at all in a post-Me Too era. It is really interesting to revisit these movies and see how inappropriate they are. But I guess society changes and we wouldn't make movies with those things in them now, I hope. But yeah, this movie sucks a lot. Okay, this is a purely self-indulgent movie that I watched, but this movie, which is Digimon Adventure Last Evolution Kizuna, if you are unfamiliar with this series, I'm not even gonna get into it, but this is one of my favourite movies of all time. It is basically the final finale to a franchise that has been running since 1999, and it's really heart-wrenching, basically, what happens in this movie. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but I would say that if you're not familiar with the Digimon franchise, which most people aren't, let's face it, and this movie is purely for the fans. Like, there is no way that this movie was not written for fans of this franchise, but this is actually a really good animated movie regardless of whether you're familiar with the franchise or not. Like, I watched it with someone who watched it with no familiarity with the characters or the world and was in tears by the end of it. So yeah, like, I would check it out if you're into anime or if you're into animated films in general. I think it's really good in that sense. It's really sad though, especially if you've followed this series your whole life like me and are strangely obsessed with it in a way that you can't really explain to anyone. Again, like me, this was sort of the most perfect way for this series to end, but also the most heart-wrenching way. So yeah, I'll leave you to decide if you want to watch it or not. Alright, only a couple more, including The Amazing Spider-Man 2, with Spider-Man No Way Home coming at the end of the year. This is the only live-action Spidey movie I haven't seen, and considering Andrew Garfield may or may not be returning for Spider-Man No Way Home, I decided it was time to finally watch this 2.5-hour juggernaut of a film that generally gets a bad rap from a lot of people. Personally, I didn't think it was that bad, although I do accept a lot of the criticisms that people have of this movie. Essentially that it's way too long, there's a lot going on between Electro and Harry Osborn, who, can I just say, was terribly performed. I'm so sorry, but the actor who played this, who was also the actor in the lead role of Chronicle, which I said was one of my favourite films, just was so woeful, as well as the relationship between Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy. This is probably like a 7-year-old movie, so I'm gonna spoil it now. At the end of the movie, Gwen Stacy dies because Spider-Man is unable to save her, and to be honest, I found that really refreshing in like the current superhero landscape, like retroactively refreshing, because it's not often we see a superhero kind of fail to save the girl or to, you know, do what they're trying to do. And it was interesting to see a Spider-Man that failed so badly. I think that was really refreshing. Like, I'd love to see him in Spider-Man No Way Home reflecting on that, like we see, because there was a planned sequel for this movie, but it never ended up happening for a multitude of reasons. But I would like to see if Andrew Garfield does appear in No Way Home, which again I do think he will, if he is struggling with the loss of Gwen Stacy and his failure in that sense. I actually thought this was really good. I understand most people would disagree with me, but yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with it. The Rental is a 2020 horror film that I think, looking back on it, again, I'm warming more to it than I did when I just finished watching it. Like, I think I'd give it maybe 3 stars now, but I gave it 2.5 stars when I watched it. But the premise of this is a group of people, a group of friends go to a rental and weird stuff kind of starts happening and they suspect the owner. And I feel so bad for this poor owner. Spoilers, the owner of the Airbnb doesn't do anything wrong, but they just assume it's him, and it's really bad. Things don't end up well for him, and I felt really bad for him the whole time. He must have been so confused because he didn't do anything wrong by the end of it. This was fun. It's very slow moving. It doesn't really get any faster, but like, I would kind of want to watch it again now. Like, I think I'm warming to it a lot, kind of 2 weeks after watching it. So yeah, check it out. Second last, and possibly the biggest disappointment of the year for me, was Muppets Most Wanted. If you watched an earlier episode of this series, I can't remember which one, but I watched The Muppets with Jason Segel, which I thought was incredible, really funny, really charming, really well written. This sequel, which Jason Segel had nothing to do with, unfortunately, was so bad. Terrible, terrible music, and just a really not fun concept where Kermit the Frog switches out with a fake Kermit who's really evil and is taking the Muppets for a ride. Kermit ends up in jail. Again, all the songs are really bad, not catchy, compared to like those amazing songs from Jason Segel's Muppet song, like Man or Muppet. Absolute classic. There's nothing really like that in this movie, and the soundtrack just isn't, I don't know, it just doesn't really work. Ricky Gervais is the main kind of human character and just isn't really very endearing at all. And as well as that, you've got Ty Burrell, aka Phil from Modern Family, in like an Inspector Clouseau, like Pink Panther kind of role. Again, none of it really hit for me, and I was really disappointed by this movie. I didn't really enjoy it at all, and it was kind of a slog to get through. Finally, continuing my endeavours to watch all of the Friday the 13th movies over this year, which is taking a really long time because they're starting to all be very, very similar. I watched Friday the 13th part 6, maybe 5, I don't know, Jason Lives. So in this one, Jason is resurrected from the dead as a zombie, and this is the first time it kind of takes a supernatural kind of turn. Jason is now a zombie. He is now like a living dead. He has superhuman strength and he's off on his usual murdering rampage, and this one was fine. Again, they're pretty much all the same movie. There's not too much lore going on in this series. Like, Jason is killing people, but there's, you know, he's back to life. There's not like you're not learning anything about how this stuff is happening in the world, which is fine. They're just average slasher movies. I think I've got 4 left now. There's way too many of these movies than there should be. But yeah, I thought this one was fine. The first one is still by far the best. Like, that was an actual good slasher movie, and now they've just franchised it, obviously because it makes money. But overall, this one was pretty meh. So that is everything I watched in August 2021. Again, there will be a new episode for September in a few weeks once September is over. Thank you so much for watching. Please check out the others. And as I said at the top of the video, I have a bunch of series on YouTube. My podcast, 20th Century Boy, Mike Check, Mike Plays Games with Friends, Mike Talks, Lots of stuff on here that I would love for you to check out. Please subscribe, share the videos, comment, thumbs up, everything else you do. And I will catch you in the next video. See you later.
But I went to run my hand through your hair and I noticed you were attached to string. You were a puppet this whole time, you were attached to string.